you like as a kid? And yeah,
Uh, well, before I get started, man, I just want to commend you for being
yeah,
so transparent and open. That's one of the
yeah,
reasons why I enjoy your podcast because it's not easy to talk about these things openly.
yeah.
And we're in a world where a lot of us are afraid to be ourselves. You know, we tend to be very insecure because of everything that we see around us, whether those messages are true or not. You know, the mind is a strange, it's a beautiful thing, and it's also a strange thing because of what we start to develop these thoughts of perfection and all these other things we compare ourselves to. So anyway, man, I just want to give you I want to give your credit for just coming out and just laying it all out there. I respect that a lot. And that's a perfect segue into talking about my childhood because
Yeah.
I mean, if I can be honest with you, man, I can't imagine having a better upbringing than the one that I had.
Okay. Okay.
I feel very fortunate, and it's now. I mean, it took me till my my late 30s and 40s. I think really after I had my first son to really appreciate the life that I've had. You know, I've been very fortunate. You know, again, if we're talking about the circles because I grew up in church too, so we're talking about in church language. I've been blessed, right? I had a very blessed life, right? So childhood was great, a lot of fun. Um, there isn't anything really specific that I can think of, although I know
Hmm.
now that there probably were messages that I received subconsciously or consciously as a child that still affect me to this day. And
Hmm.
I don't think anybody had any intention of ever harming me. My parents were, my parents were great, man. I mean,
Hmm.
of course, nobody's perfect, right? And they only know what they know, right? And they pass it on to me. I would say probably the most traumatic experience in my life was losing my brother when I was
Hmm.
14. You know, my brother
Okay.
died about 6 days before his 10th birthday,
Wow.
and
Okay.
I was just about to go into high school, right? It was my freshman year, so 14 years old, teenager, you already got all these other things going on. So when that happened, it just was like it was it wrecked us, man. Like
Mm.
we're a tight family. You know, there's a total of seven of us. Family's very close knit, very tight. Like I said, man, I grew up about as good as you could ask for. My in-laws, my parents, my
Hmm.
mom's family, my dad's family know each other. We'd all hang out together. We did the same thing every year for Christmas, Thanksgiving. Like I had it pretty good, man. I had it really good. I can't complain.
Yeah.
Um, shout out to my parents and my family, man. I really they're the reason why I'm able to carry myself with the confidence that I do today. But with that being said, we all have an inner child, man,
Yeah.
and that's definitely one of those events that I know to this day affects me. You know,
Hmm.
and it's just you can't undo that.
I
So
was, yeah, I was gonna say, when you're talking about like church, what kind of out of curiosity, because I think it's, there's so many different expressions and denominations, like what kind of church culture were you a part of? Was it
man,
charismatic? Was it a little bit of a mix? It was.
Pentecostal all day, man. I grew up from I mean, my earliest memory is laying under the pew at my grandfather's church. My grandfather, my mom's dad was my pastor
Okay.
for most of my life until my parents started their church, and
Okay.
then my dad became my pastor, right? But I have ministers on both sides of my family, man. I when I say I grew up in church, bro, I grew up in church, like,
Yeah.
and we were part of the Assemblies of God, the Southern Pacific District, right? The Spanish
Yeah.
section, like that. That's what those are my roots, man. Shout out to SPD, shout out to TDF, my home church.
Hmm.
My church growing up. I miss my grandfather. I wish I could hear him preach again. He was an amazing preacher, man.
Hmm.
And that's how I was raised, man. That's how I was
Yeah.
raised. And I think some of that trauma, though, some of that childhood trauma did come from church, though. It did, man. You know, learning about hell and all that stuff as a kid. I don't know about all that, man.
Sure.
It's like why do I need to how am I supposed to like process these things,
Yeah.
So
Yeah. My experience was similar. My mom, my mom preached a little bit at like women's conferences, and this was Loveland, Colorado, Northern Colorado, beautiful place to grow up, and we were in Fort Collins, but it was a fairly big church, maybe 3,000 people, so that's kind of mega churchy, and yeah, it's interesting when you're younger, you don't, sometimes people's quote unquote testimony, right, is like if they get if they find Jesus later in life, they go, "Oh, well, I screwed around when I was," but when we just don't really know, our past is just we only know church, so there's not really a lot of like, I went out and rebelled and then I came back to the faith. I mean that it's a double-edged thing because it's like if you're around it all the time, does it mean you you get it, right? And like even the thing you're saying about hell, it's like there's a lot of kind of control and fear in these messages.
Yeah,
And
big time.
anyway, it's something interesting to talk about now because I'm still kind of like, no, I still think that's real, but it's like the question's more like why though? Can you answer why instead of just saying, yeah, I got you. So we probably have similarities with this.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, again, man, it's hard. You talk about deconstruction, and
Yeah,
I am 150% absolutely deconstructing my faith, man.
I got
I'm the church right now. I keep the church at arm's length,
you. Okay.
meaning I still have love for the church. I always will, but I need to see it from a different angle, man. I had to I have to uh I have to undo the programming. I have to undo the scripting, and
Okay.
it's an insanely difficult thing to do, man, because again, that's all I know. That's all I know, man. My mind wants to go back to those things that, my mind's telling me to go back to that certainty, to go back to that you know, that there's safety and security in that, man. And so right now I'm off balance. I if people think deconstruction is a great place to be, man, it doesn't feel good at all,
Hmm.
but it's necessary. It's
Okay.
necessary because I can't continue those. I can't now that I've thought the way I've thought, I've seen the things I've seen. I can't go backward.
Hmm.
You know,
What prompted the um so for people listening, because deconstruction is just basically means you're like evaluating, like an intense sort of survey of stuff that you're kind of taught and you're questioning kind of, is that actually true, or what's the fruit of that thinking, you could say, right? And that kind of covers like a lot of stuff. But
yeah,
what
you can
prompted
go a
you
lot of different
doing
ways with
that,
it.
or how long you think that's been going on, that you were like, what prompted the deconstruction?
I think the seed was planted years ago, man. I went to so when I graduated high school, um, didn't do anything right after high school, and then I uh, uh, I wanted to prepare for ministry.
Okay.
So in my mind, I thought, ministry was pastoring a church in the traditional sense, right?
Hmm.
So I went to a Bible college called LABI, Latin American Bible Institute.
Okay.
It's very well known in our circles. It's been around for a long time. My grandfather both of my grandfathers were professors. In fact, that's how our family ended up in Southern California from New Mexico, because my grandfather came out here to teach at LABI. I still have a lot of love for LABI. I'm glad I went there, met a lot of great people, a lot of great friends.
Hmm.
But I went with the intention of, okay, I need to prepare because when I'm done with this, I'm going to be pastoring a church, right? And I kind of laugh now that I think about that, but that's where my mindset was, man. That's what
Right.
I knew. I understood that to be what you're supposed to do. So I went to school, and it was like this. It was cool. It was this, but it was like there was this nagging feeling, man, that like I
Hmm.
was like, okay, I'm doing all this stuff. I'm checking off all the boxes. I'm reading. I'm praying. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. But I still feel like me. I still feel like like. And when I say me, I mean like the things I didn't want anybody to know about. The stuff
Hmm.
that it's like, the bad stuff, right? The human stuff. Now that I know, it's just being human.
Mhm.
And so it was this like back and forth, man. And I didn't really have a way to express it to anyone. Not that anyone wouldn't listen. I've always had supportive people in my
Mhm.
life, but I didn't know how to like kind of. And it was during that time that I think the seed was planted, where I started to just think like, well, why do I see it this way? You know, why do I see things like this? But but to answer your question, when I became aware of like the beginning of my deconstruction, it's probably been going on for, I would say, probably the past 5 years.
Okay.
Since my son was born, when
Okay.
my youngest son was born, that was around the time where you know, I started really just questioning everything, you know,
Okay.
and it continues.
Yeah, and so when you were doing school, because I think we have some similarities in our journey and our timeline. Because for me, I went to the House of Prayer when I was 18, right, which is like
Nice.
right after high school, and I did their like Bible college school, and
Okay.
it doesn't really count for much, in the collegiate world now, but um, yeah, that was 18 to, and the last year I struggled with my mental stuff, but I still finished. And so were you like right out of high school when you did that? When you did
No,
the
I was about a year after. So
Okay.
when I had no desire to go to any type of school after high school.
Yeah.
All I want to do is I just wanted to kick it and have fun. Um, I had no like, yeah, I was a mess, man. I had no ambition. Like I didn't, I just
I
didn't
got
want. I was just glad school was over. I was happy I didn't have to
you.
go anymore.
That's how, yeah, that's pretty normal
You
though.
know?
Yeah, I mean, with deconstruction, I would say, I guess the question or one curious thing is, and this comes from doing the book club and hanging out with Jacob a lot too, and talking through sort of, um, there's this guy named Jared Bias, the Bible for Normal
Yeah,
People podcast, right?
love
And
that guy. Yeah, I
he
follow
was
him.
talking about this idea that kind of truth is sort of reduced to only scripture, right? So when we think of like what's the truth, we
Yeah.
think scripture. We
Hmm.
think Genesis to Revelation and the canon, blah, 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 right? And then, there's all these debates around that because it's like, well, it's not in the original, whatever, right? So a lot of times, even when you're doing like theology training, although I've never been to seminary, so I don't fully know, a lot of it still is trying to understand the text, right? But what the point that this guy was making was, what about other things that are around the Bible that are
Yes.
kind of psychology, sociology, right? And that's where it gets challenging because there's so much knowledge out there and there's so much
Yeah.
different expressions. And so I think when you grow up in church, your default is like, I need to understand the Bible, right? And I'm still, me to this day, I'm still kind of doing that. Like, I'm still like, well, I used to read the Bible and now I don't. And
Yeah.
so I think probably what you've been doing, and I remember you talking to Jacob when I first met you, I overheard some of your conversation, and you were like just telling him stuff that you were reading, and you were reading some book about the subconscious and all these things. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. I want to do that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway, I don't know if you relate to that, if that's what part of the journey is. Like you're like,
Part of
oh,
it.
I'm
Yep.
gonna go study, um, recapture the rapture, or whatever. That's not really like the Bible, or it's not Christian, quote unquote, right? But it's like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I mean, there's definitely can be strange things out there that are like, well, I don't know if I want to read that, but I mean, we need to be open to kind of exploring, I would
Yeah.
say. Yeah.
I agree with you 100%, man. 100%.
So one of the things that I was doing, on the form, I think would be interesting to hear. Uh, you were telling me about you went through kind of like a little bit of a crisis back in like 2008. So now I'm trying to do the math. You would have been like Wait, 5 years
I was
old?
20. I was
Yeah,
27. I was 27 at the time.
27. Okay, wow, that's
Yeah.
when I went through a lot of hard stuff. 27. So, which
We
still
share a
is,
lot in common, man.
yeah, which is also very young. But anyway, life is hard, guys. It's not like, oh, you're young, it should be easy. No, but
Not at all.
yeah, maybe you could talk a little bit about that because, and we can kind of come back to the faith stuff too. And but what was sort of, what was going on kind of before that led you to, you know it being a hard time as you look back on that almost 20 years ago or 16 years ago or something.
Man, it was and you know what's funny when you asked me those questions.
Yeah.
Actually, when I was filling out the form,
Hmm.
I started thinking about these things that I hadn't thought about it in a long time.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, it's been a long time, so it's been on my mind now, and really kind of just reflecting. I guess now my attitude towards it is I'm just grateful, man. I'm grateful
Hmm.
that what I wanted to happen didn't happen,
Okay.
because on the other side of it is where I'm at now. I have my family. Um, I'm blessed to have a good job, right? And I'm here to enjoy other things I would have missed out on. I would have missed out on a lot of life. So if there's anybody out there that's listening and you are considering taking your life, you have to understand that it's don't do it. Don't do it,
Right.
because
Right.
there's more. There's another chapter coming, and there are people that need to meet you. They need to hear from you.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
understand the importance. But going back to '08, so I graduated Bible school in 2003, and I just really, by the time so my mentality going in versus my mentality leaving, I was just completely confused, man. I was like, didn't know what direction I wanted to go. Um, I felt like a failure. I felt like I did not achieve what I had went to achieve. I wasn't prepared in any way to take on any type of, leadership role. And I did, yeah, I helped out at my church and things like that, but I was confused, man. And so I was trying to find what I wanted to do, and I was very restricted. And that's the other reason why I'm distancing myself from that mindset, because some of that religious mindset, it keeps you in a box, and you feel like, if I don't do XYZ, then I'm never going to accomplish anything, or I'm never going to get the results I'm looking for. So I was trapped in that. And then a lot of self-pity, right? A lot of feeling sorry for myself. I didn't have a work ethic. I didn't have a drive. I was all over the place in my 20s, man. And I was never diagnosed with depression.
Okay.
Uh, I can think of plenty of instances, man, where I know I was depressed. I know I was struggling somehow. Mentally, it was weighing on me. So
Okay.
anyway, fast forward to '08, I'm starting to get I started to pick up things a little bit better. Right. I started to develop the work ethic that had always been modeled to me, because my father his work ethic is impeccable, man. Like, he showed me that. And I finally was starting to catch on to it. And I was having, I had some other things going on, but I still, man, even with that, I was still like, there was a lot of self-hate. There was a lot of just, and that's why I know, man, if someone who grew up as well as I did can have issues like that,
Yeah.
I mean, prevalent. I mean, I don't know how you could be raised better than I was, man. And I'm not saying that to brag.
Right.
I'm proud. I mean, it could be different. I know a lot of
Mhm.
people that grew up on the opposite side, right? So anyway, it was a. Did you want me to tell you about that particular night, or?
If you want to share, I'm curious what, um, I, my story, and people have heard on the podcast many times, and other guests, you know, anytime anybody has an experience of suicidal thoughts, and I'm like, oh, been there, so I am curious what that was like and what kind of stopped you from, doing so.
Well, so I'll take you back to that night. So I was, it was funny. It's funny. I remember it was a Wednesday night,
Okay.
because I hadn't been to church in a long time, and my dad and I had gotten into it, and so he basically told me I needed to leave the house. So I was living with my grandma at
Okay.
that time. Okay. And so I hadn't been home, and for whatever reason, man, I wanted to go to Wednesday night service so that I could see my mom and just, I just want to see everybody again. Not
Yeah.
that we hadn't seen each other, but it wasn't that big of a deal. But I just wasn't
Okay.
living at home anymore. So I went, and then I had plans that evening to hang out with some friends. And so when I left church, I went to the store, picked up some beers, and then me being me, I'm cracking those beers open while I'm driving, just pounding them, chilling,
Okay.
going to the apartment.
Yeah.
That's just this is how I do things.
Okay.
Always to the extreme, man. So I show up, I'm already, on a good one, and then there's some liquor there, smoking weed, we're doing everything, right?
Mhm.
And again, I don't knock any of those things. I'm just, that's just what it was at that time, right?
Mhm.
People can make their own choice on that. Um, so we're hanging out, and I remember my friend. She had met this guy at a club, and he was coming over, and he was bringing, he came over, and he brought I think his cousin or something like that. Anyway, I didn't know these guys, right? But we're just hanging out, and I start drinking, like, just I'm drinking, right? Like,
Mhm.
I'm not taking shots of tequila. I'm drinking cups of tequila. Like, I'm doing it for real. It's like I'm doing. So I'm on, when you're in that type of mindset, man, anything goes. And
Right.
basically there was a comment made to me by the guy's cousin, and I just snapped. I snapped, and I just started, was challenging them, cursing them out, telling them, calling them out, like, let's go, just going crazy, man. Totally out of character for me, because I've never been like a violent person. I've
Mhm.
never been an aggressive, like, fighter. I'll fight if I have to, but I'm not the guy that goes around looking for fights. But that night I was looking for one, man. And
Okay.
so anyway, the girls were like uh, freaking out and saying they were going to call the cops on me, like I needed to calm down. And so I was just like, well, the hell with you guys then. So I walked out. I left the apartment, and I remember going straight to my car. And I got in my car, turned the ignition on, and I remember this, man, to this day. In my
Mhm.
mind, I just was thinking, I'm gonna go look for a wall, and I'm just gonna drive right through that thing.
Mhm.
I was
Hmm.
like, I shouldn't be here anymore.
Okay.
That was my thought. I shouldn't be here anymore.
Yeah.
And I had instances before where I would say things like, I'd get into a mindset, and I would start saying things to myself like, why is my brother gone? I should be gone.
Hmm.
Why isn't he here? I should be out there. Like, basically, like, what am I doing? I'm not doing anything. I'm not.
Mhm.
What? Why am I here?
Mhm.
Which is so crazy, because it's like, that's such a false, like, that's how the mind plays games with us, man. And
Yeah. Yeah.
the way we talk to ourselves and the words we use are very, very critical. We have to be careful what we say. We have to be careful what we say to ourselves. But anyway, I was in that car, man, and I remember putting it in drive and
Mhm.
just taking off.
Mhm.
And then I didn't remember anything else after that,
Hmm.
except for the in the morning when I woke up, I was parked all like, I was parked on the opposite side of the street.
Okay.
It was crazy, man. It was like I was
Yeah.
facing, like, it was like there was this little island that divides the street from like the street I was parked on, and I
Yeah.
was like facing that thing, and it was wild. And my car was still on, like, it was crazy, man. And you know
Okay.
what, Jared? What's crazy?
Yeah.
That day,
Yeah.
the trees looked greener. Like, I started noticing details. The sky, everything just looked like alive and vivid to me, man. And I think that's what
Right.
happens when you're that close
Mhm.
to checking out. You know.
Yeah.
Um, so
Wow,
it was
man.
nuts, man. It was
Yeah. Well,
intense.
thanks for sharing. I mean, it's part of the human experience. I mean, not everyone has, um, lots of people can have symptoms of depression and never Doesn't always lead to suicidal thoughts, or a suicidal experience doesn't always mean that it's from depression either, right? So, but yeah, it's interesting because we do feel pain and, like you're saying, a certain sense of self-hatred or self-pity. Okay, just glitched out for a second. No worries. Like the thing you just said, like I'm not doing anything with my life kind of feeling, right? And there's like this Jordan Peterson, the little, I haven't listened to him a ton, but he was talking about how like, if you're not going to do anything great with your life, you your conscience kind of torments you or punishes you, right? And so I
Yeah,
think sometimes it's not it's pain, but it's also this like we're meant to do something great,
yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And
Yeah,
you want to do something great. I do. So, and it's definitely harsh because it can be a harsh voice. It's like I don't think that that's how God is speaking to us. Like,
not at all.
yeah, I made you for greatness. Like, get it together down there, right? And I know for
Yeah,
me, I go back to my relationship with my dad. That's where that influenced me the most. Like he was encouraging, anyway. So I'm not going to get into that, but I'm just like that thing that you just said about, yeah, there's self-pity and you're feeling sorry for yourself. And if someone didn't know you and they were trying to just give you some cheap advice, they would just be like, Josh, just snap out of it, dude. Like be grateful,
right.
right? Like it's a light switch. But anyway, I like what you're saying. I think that's important that if we aren't doing what we're meant to do, it doesn't mean we're going to get suicidal, but it means there's going to be sort of a sadness to how we feel, and that hopefully leads to like doing something about that, like being like, I don't want to feel like I'm wasting time, you know?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. No, that you're right, man. I mean, that has probably has a lot to do with it. And most people don't even they're not even aware.
right.
I would have never even thought about those types of things. Again, my mindset was different back then. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I mean, you're okay. So now, I mean, I know that was a long time ago, and then you talked about how you went to New Mexico for 6 months and kind of had like a reset and like a sabbatical or recovery time, and I relate to that too because I've had my recovery times too. But like, it seems like now, talk to me about like on the lines of wanting to make an impact and be great. What has gotten you interested in wanting to um, do like the coaching thing that you're doing, and like you put out these YouTube videos and these shorts and these posts. That's interesting to me because that's like me doing the podcast kind of thing. Like what
Right.
what's been your journey with that? Like what do you talk to me about that? The coaching. You're a coach, right? Am I getting that right?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
you are.
Yeah.
You are. And I think it's I mean, number one, it has to do with a lot of the way that I'm wired. Right.
Okay.
I've always been just you know, and someone who has empathy for others.
Hmm.
That's just always been me. No matter every part of my life, that's been a constant. That's never not been me. But the other part of it is just that I want to be see, and the reason, and I'll kind of go back to what you were saying earlier about this not being a Christian podcast. I make that completely clear on my YouTube channel. I'm like, this is not a faith based. This has nothing to do with that. Like, you
Right.
want to know about my faith, you want to know my beliefs, you can ask me. I'm not hiding anything from anyone. But the main idea behind it was that, again, I grew up in church. I had a community. I had a family. I had a group of people that I could go to, and there are people that don't have access to that
Hmm.
because that religion stands in the way. So for me, I'm looking at, well, look, I know I'm called to ministry. That never went away. and no one can ever take that from me, because
Right.
that didn't come from anyone else. That didn't come from, and even thinking about that, like, how do I process that in my mind today? But just knowing that I have a purpose, and my
Hmm.
purpose is that. So when I was younger, I thought the purpose would look like me behind a pulpit, and now it's my purpose
Yeah.
is me behind my phone, right?
Yeah.
And welcoming all, like all are welcome on my channel.
Yeah.
Everyone's welcome, And again, and probably the main reason why I love coaching is because I've always had help, man. I've always had people to lean on. I've always
Mhm.
had support. I've always had wise voices in my ear. I've always had people that just wanted to see me do well, that just loved me for me. Even though I grew up in church, my family never tried to control us. They never were super fundamental.
Right.
Our parents were approachable. My grandparents were approachable. Like, it's different. Like, I know everybody has a different church experience. Mine was pretty. Again, it was pretty good, man. I can't, I really can't complain. But to
Mhm.
answer that, I mean, it's just something that I'm driven to do. I want to see people. Some people may never have had that help before, and
Right.
so this is my way of giving back and showing appreciation for everything that's been given to me throughout my life. Because I didn't ask to be born into this family, man. I didn't choose how I grew up. No one
Yeah.
does,
Yeah.
and I got lucky.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a yeah. Thanks for sharing, man. I love it. I mean, I think we have a lot of things in common because same thing. I've always thought, and my mind still goes to the ministry thing in the church
Right?
context, like what you just said. Like, I need to
Yeah,
be doing a sermon every week, like, and that's why I don't want, like I said, I don't want to make the podcast like that. Like, and I just recorded something last night, and I'm like quoting Luke 9, and I'm like, oh well, I'm still quoting scripture, like it's
that's dope.
there's,
That's dope.
sure, if you do that like 25 times in like a 15-minute talk, that's kind of like, don't do that. That's annoying. I mean, maybe someone would like that, but no. But I think it is cliche, but it's true. Like God, the scripture, like God works all things together for good, kind of thing. And
Yes, sir.
and sometimes I have like a beef with that. Like I'm like, oh, like does that mean you just can make bad decisions and keep screwing up, and then God just somehow finds a way to redeem you? And it's like, no, it just means that like people can get hurt by their church experiences and then never get over it or never get healed and never get like a different perspective, and then that's kind of sad. And it's like, oh well, I do think God has a lot of amazing things for us, and it's just like you're saying, the deconstruction part. I think you just need some help. You need like another person to be like a mirror and coach, and someone that you can like the book club, right? Like going back to that, like a place where we can just kind of talk and have these like deep talks without it being like there's no right or wrong. No one's like, "Whoa, that's a wrong thing you just said." Let's
That's what I
so
love about it, man. That's what I love
yeah,
about
so
that.
dude, I think you're on to something with that. Now, have you like what are some things that have influenced you or inspired you when you're saying that you've been kind of on this journey for 5 years? I mean, what are you just like all over the place with stuff like YouTube and books? You're just kind of taking in. I mean, I've listened probably to the most podcast I've ever listened to, I think, in the last year, you know.
Right.
But yeah, what are some of the things that like inspire you, or are you just a bunch of stuff?
Yeah. No. Well, first of all, I have to give shout out to my sister Blue. I got to give her a lot of credit for
Yeah.
initiating my journey. When her and her family left the church, it was a big deal. This is how we grew up, man.
Hmm.
Sundays were for church, bro. That's just what it was.
Yeah.
That's a given.
Yeah.
That's what we did. That's what we do. And so I give her a lot of credit for kind of initiating me on this. Like I said, I think the seed was planted while I was in Bible school. And I'll give you some specifics on that. So I was reading a book for urban ministry class, right? Whatever that is.
Okay.
It was a great class. And I read a book. The author's name is Tony Campolo. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
I have. Yeah. Is he like kind of the emergent church guy or
I
something like that?
I
Oh,
wouldn't know, man.
oh,
I just remember reading this book, and he had a chapter dedicated to uh, how we interacted with the homosexual community as
okay.
Christians.
Okay.
And he concluded with something that I think really sparked that in me. Is he said, I don't know, like basically saying like I don't know if I can say what's right or what's wrong. He said all I know is that we can do a better job.
Yeah.
And I remember just thinking like he's right. He's right because
Mhm.
a lot of the guys that I grew up with that came out, it was never a surprise, right? We knew,
Right.
and I used to just think like, man, that's anyway. We could talk about that. That's a whole nother podcast, right? Because I have my own opinions on those things too.
Sure. Yeah.
But I just thought like, man, like this guy's coming from a place of trying to understand, and I think that's where we should be at. But anyway, as far as what influences me, so my sister, taking that brave step, and then just seeing other people. What I'm really attracted to is people that are thinkers, people that are open to thinking, not drawing conclusions based on what they're told or how they're told to draw conclusions, right?
Mhm.
But that they're open, right? My dad always used to say, my favorite theological answer is I don't know. My favorite theological he goes, my favorite theological answer is I don't know. And
Yeah.
I take that cue from him. Like it's okay to say, you know what, I don't know. I
Mhm.
have no idea, and so that inspires me when I hear people that have original thought, when I have people that are questioning things, people that challenge themselves, right? They
Mhm.
challenge their mindset, like, hey, this is how I see things, but I'm really trying to push my mind out of that, that automatic response. And again, because it's difficult, it's hard, man. It's hard when you were raised a certain way,
Mhm.
your thought pattern is a certain way, you see things through a certain lens.
Right.
Speaking of which, that book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey,
Oh yeah. Yeah, I read
that
that
book
a
changed my
long
life,
time
man.
ago.
Yeah, that book changed my life. That book
Yeah,
changed
man.
my life.
Yeah.
Yeah, man,
Yeah.
that was huge.
Yeah, I read that like I was young. It was like 2006, I think. So I was probably 20 years old or something. And
Nice.
that'd be a good book to go back and yeah, I mean, well, I think it's the like what you're saying with I don't know. I love that because um I think that's a real healthy place. I think the challenge is that, there's kind of like the scripture about what is it, the Sermon on the Mount, right? The build your house on the rock kind of analogy, and then
Mm-hmm.
the house on the sand. It's like, oh, it seems pretty obvious, right? But when the storm comes, like three little pigs kind of thing or something, right? But
Yeah.
the idea would be there's a strong temptation to always have a foundation, and that means kind of rigid lines, right? Which is there's always right or wrong. It's hard to just be in the middle, right? And like what you're
Right.
saying about the homosexuality thing, I like Preston Sprinkle. He's got a podcast. He's written a bunch of books about transgender and home and he's got like 1,000 episodes. It's called Theology and Hurrah, and I love his approach because he's pretty balanced. He's not, he interviews people who have their experiences, and he's like, well, part of the problem is we're not really around the people that identify as that, so we're just kind of trying to just tell people like, hey, just change the way you are or whatever. And it's like that doesn't work,
Ridiculous. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
So back to the empathy thing that you were saying, right? That takes time and that takes compassion. And so anyway, yeah, it's an interesting conversation because you know it's hard to admit that you don't know, especially. I mean, you're 42, I'm 37. I mean, we're not like kids, you know?
Not at all. Still act like one every once in a while, but yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, well, right. When you're young, your excuse could be, oh, well, I'm young, and I remember my, being around older people a lot and being like, oh, I want to be smart like that guy. And then it's
Hmm.
like, but then now I'm older, so now I'm like, no, well, I'm supposed to know. I'm supposed to know things, and that's a product of being in church for a long time, where you
Right.
just expect yourself to have it kind of together because you've been showing up, and it's like, well, yeah, but do you love people? Wait, do you like? Are you open to talking to people who disagree with you? Right? Like you
Yeah.
can't just show up. So, um, yeah, man. So how is the if people want to do coaching with you, how does that work? Is that you have a website, or you just
I
go
don't.
to YouTube, or
Yeah, I don't really have a structure. I'm always open to taking people on. I don't have any type of like set thing. I don't have one client yet. I'm just right now I'm focused on my videos, focused on trying to stay consistent. I'm trying to stay consistent on YouTube, trying to stay consistent on social media. But if somebody wants to reach me, they can send me a direct message through my Instagram. It's at live to learn coaching. So
okay,
LIVE, the number two, coaching, learn coaching. And then yeah, I mean we can talk, and I think basically what I would want to do is speak to them, talk to them, make sure I can help them, make
okay,
sure I think it's something I can help, because I'm not a therapist. I have no background in,
right,
I'm interested in psychology. I wish I would have majored in psychology because
yeah,
it would have definitely helped me out in sales. It
yeah,
definitely would have been helpful. But I'm not a professional, and I think I've said that a few times on my videos. Like, I if you're struggling with some serious issues, medical issues, something that needs to be looked at by a medical
right.
professional, I'm not the person. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not
Mhm.
trying to mislead anybody. But if it's someone that's just kind of stuck in a rut, just kind of like, where I was at one time, where you just don't know which direction you're going,
Mhm.
I can relate, and yeah, you said something earlier about, sending, giving my message based on my experiences and how,
Mhm.
how I see the world,
Yeah,
and coming from my perspective is how, is my approach. And like I said, sometimes it's for some people, it might not click so much with others, but for whoever thinks that it might be for them,
mhm.
absolutely, yeah, just send me a message and we'll go from there.
Yeah. I think it's just it's hard to. Most people don't just. We just need like accountability, right? I mean, it's not like you can make changes on your own, but it's probably not. It's going to be a lot harder if you just go like, well, I haven't been running and now I'm going to run every day, right? Like, or whatever it is. You don't just naturally just
Yeah.
kind of shift to discipline. Some people can, but it's most of us, it just needs someone to be like, hey, I just started doing some coaching with someone, and I'm like, yeah, so far it's just been about like my health because I'm like really trying to get my body in check, and it's been working. And I'm like, oh, well, if I would have done this 2 years ago, it would have been blah, but I can't, like the past is over. Like, so I love that you're offering that as a service to people. And you said something earlier before you were talking about the suicide experience. You were saying people need you, right? You said that phrase. And that's something that I've talked about on the podcast in early episodes. Like, it was hard for me to, when I had all these people come to the hospital and see me when I was in my really hard time. I didn't I don't think I realized the impact that I had made on my family
Yeah.
and other people. I had friends from Kansas City flew to California to see me, and so like
Right.
that phrase that you said, that's super powerful. Like, oh, people actually need me. It's not just like you know, because we can feel like we're not making much of an impact, or we can feel like we're kind of invisible sometimes. Like, oh, do people? really want me around, and I mean, don't let yourself dwell on that, but feeling that way that's normal, but like you and I, we're meant to do something great, and like we don't know what the future holds. We don't know who's going to hear this podcast. We don't know. And if you're around, then you're able to make that impact. So
Right.
cool.
Yeah, you never know, man. You never know what's coming. And just real quick, I want to say one more
Yeah,
thing about the whole church like mindset thing, right?
sure.
So one of the big issues that I have is this whole like distancing. Like we kind of put ourselves last, and I think that that's a big mistake. Because with
Hmm.
the church we use language like you have to carry the cross, you have to put God first, more of God, less of me, things like that. And I
Hmm.
think we mean well and we have a good intention, but we don't realize that everything filters through us. Your faith, your beliefs, everything filters through you. So if you're not right, if you're putting yourself last, that's going to affect everything else, right? And it's like, I encourage people like, because in church they say stuff like it's not about me, it's all about you. And I'm like, no, no, no. It absolutely is all about you.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Because if
Yeah,
you're not right, if you don't love yourself,
yeah.
that's going to affect everything. That's going to affect the way you see God. And again, one of my favorite quotes from Seven Habits is, "We don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are."
Hmm.
Right? Just to kind of paraphrase that, we don't see the
Okay.
world as it
Yeah.
is. We see the world as we are. So if
Right.
I want clarity, if I want understanding, if I want better perspective, I have to work on me. I
Yeah.
have to love myself, man. I have to be right with me, with myself.
What you're saying, or yeah, yeah. I mean, the message, it is the love your neighbor as yourself sort of um thing. Like even someone like Paul, who's seems calling himself like a bond servant of Christ. It's like, oh well, that guy's pretty selfless, right? But he also had, you know, uh 14 years of withdrawing from people and like being in the desert, and that was probably a ton of work on himself,
Yeah.
and that prepared him to do you know 40 years or whatever of ministry. And so I agree with you. Yeah, it's like you're not going to be able to give much to people if you're you know you're always depressed or anxious, or there's no like uh tools that you learn to cope. I'm not going to reach out to you and say, "Hey, be on my podcast,"
Right, right.
um so yeah, is it kind of like that? Is that what you mean, like the love yourself sort of?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
everything begins and ends with me, man. I mean, how do I have any concept of anything except through myself?
yeah,
There's just these eyes that I see things with their mind. I don't
yeah.
like, and again, scripture, we can talk about scripture all day. And I love scripture. I respect it. I think there's a lot of wisdom. I think
Right,
Jesus Christ makes sense. Okay. I haven't found any reason to completely walk away from my faith. Not yet, at least. I haven't found
right,
anything. And
right.
I'm looking for a reason. Not because I want to leave, but because I'm here to question everything.
Yeah.
But my thing is this, I always tell people this. I go, look, scripture, this is an old book that we have zero context for what the time was like when none of us were there. But
Right.
I tell people, I go, but what you do have plenty of context of? What you see in front of you,
Mhm.
the people you interact with every day, daily life. We've got a ton of context. And the problem is sometimes when we read scripture, we remove the whole like humanity from it. It's like we're just looking at something like, oh, well, this is the lesson I need to learn. Like, yeah, but what does that mean as a person, right? When Jesus says
Mhm.
love your neighbor as yourself, he never specifically says you have to love yourself, but he's alluding to it, right? He wants us to think, he wants us to discover,
Right.
like, how do I connect that? How can I love God, my neighbor? Oh, wait, I got to love me.
Mhm.
Okay, what does that look like? Am I being selfish now for doing that, or am I being selfish because I want to have my whole weekend for my family because I didn't
Mhm.
see them all week? You know,
Mhm.
and those are the things that I began to unlearn.
Yeah.
You know, these are the things that I begin to free. I'm freeing myself. So what that allows me to do, it allows me to free others. Oh, you were born a woman and you feel like you're a man. Hey, good for you. You know, oh, you identify as this, good for you. Like I
Yeah.
don't doesn't you know, I've never walked a mile in your shoes.
Right.
I don't know anything about you. So I love that, man. I'm just open. Yeah, sure. I'm fully affirming. Doesn't doesn't even phase me anymore. Like
Yeah.
I don't even have second thoughts about it, man.
Yeah. Well, no, I agree with you. I mean, we'll have to do like a part two of this,
For
which
sure.
I've only done part two, I think, with like one other person, which is I've had a lot of guests. So, but yeah, do this again, or and hopefully we could do it in person. Is what I want to do someday, or you, me, Jacob, and everybody, or something. That's the dream. So that's the dream. Write it
Yeah,
down. So,
it's gonna be a lot of fun,
but
man.
yeah, man, bro, I know we've gotten to connect with the book club, and it's a group of us, so it's not always one on one. And I really have appreciated that you text me and about the podcast, because my insecurity is like, does anybody listen to this besides my mom? No, but
I'm right
no,
there with
I
you,
don't.
man. I'm right there with you.
No, and yeah, I'm sure I was watching some of your shorts before we did this, and I'm sure it's like, look, you throw. It's an interesting time in our world with technology, because it's like, um, whatever you want to say. I mean, it's not to say you should say everything you're thinking, but if you want to say something, for me, I started out blogging in like 2007, like right before
That's
social
dope.
media. That was and I still have that blog to this day. But
Super cool.
pretty awesome. It's like whatever we want to communicate to the world, we can. I mean, it takes some work, it takes some effort to do it, but it's not that hard, So I think we have a similarity of just wanting to make an impact with the things that we say, you know.
For sure.
And so I'm hoping that people are inspired. I'm encouraged by you, and just that's why I like to do this. Is I just have my friends on and record our talk. So, okay, let me
Yeah.
ask you a last question, because
Okay.
I do like to ask this to a lot of people, which is, we talked about a bunch of things about having hope and going through struggles, and we're both here and enjoying a life and getting to talk. But like, what advice do you give to someone who is maybe struggling, or like, I know when I've gone through hard times, I listen to stuff where I'm like, oh, I want to see if I can get some hope, out of this
Yeah.
conversation. And so I was purposely like, listening to memoirs of people's struggles. And so like, what advice do you give to someone who is, maybe in a one day at a time kind of mode, of like, oh
Yeah.
man, another hard day coming my way,
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of hard to it's kind of hard to be like to specify it, right? And again, everything I
Right.
say is coming from my understanding, which for some it may make sense, for some it may not. So I apologize, but
Mhm.
uh, to give
Yeah.
my best answer, I would say, number one, one of the things that's helpful, and I don't do it enough, and I need to, is writing things down. You know,
Mhm.
write down how you're feeling.
Yeah.
Write down what you feel as best you can. Write down what you're feeling, um, and then after you've written it down, just kind of sit there, dissect things. What I found is when we take an issue that we're having, whether it's a fear, it's some kind of anxiety, or some kind of hurt. Again, nothing. There's things that are on the medical level, but I'm just saying, like in general, as a person, day to day, we have bad days, good days. I find that if you spend time trying to dissect your feelings as much as possible, they actually start to shrink. Right? It's
Mhm.
actually in our minds, it's overwhelming.
Right.
But once we kind of put everything out on the table and just kind of pick things apart, we realize that it's not actually as bad or as intense as we thought it was. Okay. Now again, that's not the, be all, end all be all, whatever, for total answer is going to work every time. But that'd be my advice. And then the other advice would be, like you said, look for content that's inspirational. I listen to Eric Thomas. I listen to all these motivational people, right? David Goggins. I mean, if you get offended by
Yeah, I have his It
David,
Can't Hurt Me to finish it.
yeah, Goggins is wild, but and I'm not that type of person, but I just draw from all these different areas, and then
Yeah.
affirmations, man, affirmations. Like it. Look in the mirror and say, I like myself, right? I love me. I'm a person. I have purpose. I'm talented. I'm not gonna always be in the season, whatever it might be. You have to. We have to talk to ourselves, man. Counsel ourselves. That'd be my advice.
Yeah. I love it, man. And then I did ask you earlier, but so I'll put your info in the notes. So you're on Instagram, and is that the best way for people to get a hold of you? Probably Instagram or YouTube.
Yeah, I'm on TikTok too. I just kind of barely started that. So you
Yeah,
can,
yeah.
if you find me on TikTok, again, I'm not that popular, so it might be hard to find. But
Okay.
Instagram, it's at Live to Learn Coaching. And that's with the number 2 at Live to Learn Coaching. And then YouTube, it's Living to Learn is the name of my channel.
Okay.
And so yeah, I mean, I guess I can send you the link and you can put it up there if you want to
Yeah.
check it out.
Yeah, for sure. I'll make sure that that's in the notes, and I'll try to find you on. I have a Little Louder Now podcast on TikTok, but I've only posted like 3 videos. So it's
Trying to ride
it's
the
where all the
TikTok
kids
wave,
are at.
man.
What'd you say?
I said I'm trying to ride the TikTok wave.
Yeah,
Trying to
well,
get in on it.
yeah. I mean, if we're going for the younger crowd, like teens, I think it's the most kind of young person population, but it's obviously more than just that anyway. So, unless you're got some beef with China, I don't know. No, I'm kidding. But, we do with anyway. But hey, bro, I'm really grateful that we got to do this, man. Thank you for
Likewise.
saying yes. And I love it, dude. I really appreciate you, and yeah, I hope to see you soon on a Sunday if you can make it. Just let me know, and I'd love to see you there. So,
Yeah, likewise, man. Thanks. This was fun, man. Thanks again, and appreciate you, man.
all
Keep
right,
doing what you do.
all right, let's do a. I'm gonna do a screenshot, like a smile, and then I'll put it on Instagram. So let you go. Enjoy your off day, and we'll be in touch.
All right, brother.
All right,
Have a
man.
good one.
Okay.